Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Understable Discourse, your go-to place for all the best disc golf news and content out there. And we have an interesting episode for you. Hopefully you enjoyed our very first edition of Chain Reaction, our show where we go back and take a look at the event that happened the previous weekend and break it down in some more detail, looking at players, the holes, the course, and just the general storylines that came out of the event itself. If you haven't checked that out, go make sure to check the episode from earlier this week on Monday. I guarantee you'll learn some things about Idlewild that you probably didn't realize. But for this week, in this episode, we're going to take a look at a few special things today. Now, we don't have a tournament this upcoming weekend because the Discraft Great Lakes Open is not going to be until the following week. So this presents us a unique opportunity to take a look at some different topics. And there are two things that I want to talk about today. Two very specific things. One, which just came out today, that's some pretty significant news as it relates to the Pro Tour, and something that has been out there for a bit that we've talked about before in the past, but now is kind of more codified and something we're going to have to deal with in the future. So we're going to look at the new PDGA rules for 2026 and the brand new, freshly dropped Disc Golf Pro Tour schedule. Let's get into it. Now we're going to start with the most recent news, which is the new Pro Tour schedule. And let me tell you, there is a lot of information here to glean that is going to be very interesting for the Pro Tour in general and what they've been doing. Every year we kind of get excited for this schedule, a little nervous for this schedule. What events are coming back? What events are leaving the calendar? And there are some noticeable gaps this year in the schedule, but the Pro Tour has done some things to help get us the events that we want to see. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. So the first news that we had that came out, like I want to say a week or so ago, was that we would be starting the season again in Brooksville, Florida at the Supreme Flight Open. That has not changed. I think it's a great event to start the year. Florida makes a lot of sense given the time of year, and it's a great, challenging tournament to kick off the season. I'm really excited to see what happens there. And typically after that, we kind of take a leap and start moving across the country. But now we're going to be taking a pit stop in Louisiana at the Big Easy Open, which is going to be, I think, really a really exciting event to go to. I think the Big Easy Open might be one of the best names I've seen for a Pro Tour event. It's going to be at a course that we have never seen before. It's a John Houck designed course, and they're talking about taking the course that's there and lengthening it, making it more tour appropriate. And from what I understand for the people that have talked about it, it's a really fantastic course and a fantastic area. And I think this is a big win for disc golf because it gets us closer to larger areas with more population, and specifically areas that we have not been in before. It's a fresh market for disc golf, and I'm really amped up to see kind of how successful that is, how many people they can bring in, and it's the Big Easy Open. You've got to be excited for something new on the tour. Now, what's not new on the tour and a more established presence is the Charlotte Disc Golf Club. We all know Charlotte, North Carolina has one of the most established historic clubs in the entire United States. It's a fantastic place to go play disc golf. There are courses everywhere. I guarantee you that you can't go on Instagram and scroll for 5 minutes and not have seen at least 4 or 5 videos that have come from a course somewhere in the North Carolina area and the Charlotte area specifically. But we're going to be going after Louisiana, jumping to North Carolina for the Queen City Classic, and it's going to be held at a long-standing course that we've seen on tour, one of my favorite courses on tour, the Hornet's Nest. Now, if you're kind of new to disc golf and you're not familiar with the term Hornet's Nest, it's a place that we went to for many years for the Pro Tour Championship at the end of the year. It's a really interesting course, difficult in its design, has some very unique holes. I think hole 2 might be one of the most picturesque holes that we have in disc golf. And it's a really, really great time. I'm excited to see the tour returning to the Hornet's Nest and to the Charlotte area, which is going to be fantastic. Now, if you're saying, Gary, wait a minute, what about the event that always comes like at the very beginning of the season? The Waco Annual Charity Open. Yeah, it's not on the Elite Series or major schedule this year. That's pretty crazy to not see Waco, a long-standing course and event, or long-standing event. Brings about a lot of debate as to whether or not that type of course belongs on tour. And I think it's a fun event to watch because we always know that, Waco is wacko. We get interesting results there. And yeah, it's not going to be on the Elite Series tour this year. Now, before you're correcting me in the comments, but Gary, there actually is going to be some competition at Waco this year in a very different thing called the Jomez Pro Series, which is going to be 3 A-tier events that are going to be hosted at different times during the year, allowing competitors to be able to compete at some different kind of courses. They're claiming that these events are going to be set up so that we can return to courses that maybe fall off the tour, areas that are hard to film, or use it as a chance to test out new areas for potential tour stops in the future. And this year, we get the Waco Annual Charity Open being played in May 1st through 3rd on this Jomez schedule. So that's actually going to come later in the season after a number of other events. So it's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen when we go to Waco, but after it's been a while. And it's kind of reminiscent of, and I don't want to throw any shade out there, it kind of feels like it's the Pro Tour's version of the Go Throw Tour, where they're going to other courses and they're allowing this like secondary company to film it and do all that kind of fun stuff. It is what it is. We get more disc golf, right? We get more disc golf. So Jomez is going to be covering it. They're talking about how it's all going to be next day free coverage for everyone out there. So I don't think anyone's going to complain about getting free coverage of certain events, which will be a lot of fun. The other 2 events we're going to see on there are the Cascade Challenge. So yes, the Cascade Challenge, which is in Washington, was removed to be put on this new Jomez Pro Series. I don't know why that is. I think it was a pretty fun event this year. Maybe they feel like it needs a bit more work, and there were some issues with the coverage out there that made it difficult for the live footage. So maybe it makes sense to put it here. And then the last one's going to be the Champions Landing Open, held in July in Emporia, Kansas. So for a lot of people who've been wondering when we're going to return to Emporia, it's going to happen next year on the Jomez Pro Series schedule. Now, these are all going to be 3 A-tier events, and while the Pro Tour hasn't released its full points breakdown yet, what we do know from what they told us in this article is that they're going to be worth some degree of bonus points towards your overall tour point standing. They're not going to be worth anywhere near the same amount as an Elite Series event, but they will have bonus points for I don't know if it's just for playing or if it's for winning, but they said bonus points will be applied for these particular 3 events. Between you and me, I'd like to see in the future them use this for some other interesting places. It'd be kind of neat to see them go to some of the courses that are hard to film that we know about, that are really beloved places. Maybe an Eagles Crossing, maybe even a course out in our area. We got Failure Lake. I'd love to see Failure Lake make it to the Jomez Pro Series schedule, but time will tell. They have opened up a bidding process for the future for that series, so we might see some really interesting and unique courses join the Jomez Pro Series in the future. Now, I'll say this as a caveat: we see a lot of schedule changes and flip-flops and mashups, and who knows how many years they're going to run this Jomez Pro Series, but I think it's a great idea to be able to get us courses that we want to see, that we're going to get some top tier coverage of. Like, for instance, this past year, everyone was really missing the Jonesboro Open, and there was coverage of it, but it wasn't, the standard that we all like to hold up to with Jomez and the Disc Golf Network. But imagine the same thing, but this year we would have it on Jomez Pro, next day coverage. And the other thing is, they mentioned there might be some different people in the booth, not just the typical Paul Ulibarri, Nate Sexton, Big Germ combo, or some combo of the 3 of them. They mentioned some additional people maybe joining the booth, so that remains to be seen who that's going to be. I'm hoping it's maybe some fresh people. I would love to see some brand new faces make it into the commentary game, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and be able to be a part of that in the future. So this also creates, I think, a lot of opportunity for maybe people who are aspiring to be involved in coverage, and we'll see what happens with all this. But back to the main schedule itself, and speaking of Jonesboro Open, it's returning to the Elite Series schedule in April for next year. But just before Jonesboro Open, we have the first major of the year announced as the PDGA Champions Cup that we all know and love, and it's going to be returning to Bedford County in Lynchburg, Virginia, at the brand new edition of New London. And let me tell you something, as someone who has played this new edition, it is, I think, going to be a very comparable event in terms of what we are always familiar with when it comes to the Champions Cup. When we think about, we want it to be a tough, tight, wooded course, I think New London's going to be able to do that at the same level of like a Tampere or a Northwood Black. Probably not, slightly easier than those courses, but I think it's going to issue enough of a difficulty that it will feel like a traditional Champs Cup that we kind of want to see and that we always talk about. But continuing on, we're going to get the Kansas City Wide Open again. I think that's fantastic. It gave us a really, really great event. I think the course is wonderful there. And then we move into the Texas stretch. So you see they're kind of playing around with the order of these events, which is going to be interesting to see some of these be at different times of the year than we're used to. We get the Open at Austin held in the beginning of May, followed up with the OTB Open in California. And then we got to go to the Northwest Championship in Oregon. So what's also special about those three events, the Open at Austin, OTB, and Northwest Championship, they're all going to be DGPT Plus events back to back to back. So within a stretch of what looks like maybe 4 to 5 weeks, we're going to have 3 DGPT Plus events, 4 rounds. That's a lot on the schedule. I'm interested why they jammed all of them together like that. Maybe that's something we can figure out, and we'll, in the future, we'll get more light on. But really interesting. Now, one event that's not there, that you are wondering why it's not there, is the Music City Open. All right, we will not be returning to Nashville in 2026. It is not on the Jomez Pro Series list, so I'm sure Nashville will have its own event, but the Music City Open is going to be gone in 2026, which, everyone's personal opinions aside, I know they do a lot of work out there. They put on a great event. It's not my favorite event to watch. I watch everything, so that's fine, but I can see why maybe, viewership is down a little bit for Music City. We'll see if it's like Jonesboro and returns to the tour at some point in the future, or makes its way onto the Jomez Pro Series, but that remains to be seen. But after we get to the Northwest Championship, we move to our second major of the year, which is the European Disc Golf Festival in Tallinn, Estonia, and this is where we hit our Europe stretch. Now, this year, we've seen a quite extensive European stretch with events happening in the States at the same time, so players could kind of have a choice but how they wanted to bounce around and do all that. That's not what we're going to see here in 2026. We're actually carving out a specific block for European events. So from the end, so Northwest Championship is going to be held on June 4th through the 7th, and then we have 4 straight European events with no events on US soil happening during that time, and no events on like the Jomez Pro Series happening during that time. I'm sure there'll be A tiers, things will happen during that time frame, but when it comes to Pro Tour stops on the schedule, nothing else. And it's going to be the European Disc Golf Festival as a major, obviously. Then we're going to have the Swedish Open, the Ale Open, and the Heinola Open. And that's it. That is your European stretch this upcoming year in 2026. That means no Krokol, no PCS, no Konopiste. And I'll be honest, it's tough for me. I really like European disc golf. That's hard to see, it going down just those events. I like that they're blocking them all together and they're leaving space so that, pros from the United States can go over and experience all of them. That's great. But I wish we were getting more events over there, or they would run more events under the PDGA Europe banner. They are doing PDGA Europe events. They're stripping the Q Series status away, so there are going to be more European events, but we're not going to see European fields be very strong, or American fields be represented in those European events outside of probably these 4 events. And even then, the Heinola Open, which is great and all, is 4 days before the U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championship, which is going to be held in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so that means that anyone looking to prepare for that major will likely not play in the Heinola Open, because why would you play an event on July 12th, fly maybe at best that night, and then have less than 4 days to prepare for a numerous round and multi-course event for a major? You just don't. So I don't like that the U.S. Women's is going to basically take one of the best things about the European market, which is the really strong European FPO division, and force all of those players to make a decision as to whether they want to stay at home and play in one of the only 4 European events, or come over to the States to prepare early for U.S. Women's. And then what's going to end up happening is the Heinola Open is going to suffer from the FPO field not knowing what to do when it comes to the people who already are in Europe. And then you're going to have all the Americans who are going to be like, why would I travel over there just to travel back, destroy my body clock, and then have to play this major? So I think the Heinola Open is going to be an extremely weak FPO field, and it sucks that that's the case. We should see some decent MPO field because it's a large break after that. So after the European swing ends, we make it to the Ledgestone Open, typical end of July, beginning of August. We then bounce to the Discmania Challenge, and then the Preserve, right? The Preserve is typically a lot earlier than a lot of this, so it's going to be weird to see it happening in August. I think that's going to be kind of unique. I know that Simon has talked about tweaks that he wants to do to the course to make it even harder. So Preserve going to happen later in the year, and then we follow it up with the Disc Golf Pro World Championships at the typical D-Glow location, up there at Toboggan. We follow that up with Idlewild, and then we jump right into our playoff schedule of the Green Mountain Championship, MVP Open, and then we have the U.S. Disc Golf Championship, so USDGC, and Throw Pink. Throw Pink is still technically not a major. It is still a PDGA A tier. Someday, somehow, it's got to be a major. We all know it. It's a major in our hearts. And then they finish the season off with the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, held again in Bedford County. That's really interesting that we're coming back to Bedford County for a second a second large event in the same year. Specifically, though, they will not be playing New London for the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. They will be having it exclusively at Ivy Hill. Now, I'll be honest with you. I like the Bedford County, Lynchburg area. I love what they did for Worlds the other year, and I think they're going to be great for the Champions Cup. But Ivy Hill is a course that a lot of pros have said is just not. It's not one of their favorites, and to make it the Pro Tour Championship, which is a tournament that a lot of people have different opinions of anyway, that's tough. I think they got to do a lot to the course to make this Pro Tour Championship worthy, and we'll see what they do. They have obviously a whole year and a half to figure it out, but it's a bit odd. I imagine if any part of this schedule that's going to catch flack is going to be that right there, that we were returning to Bedford for a second time and not sticking to somewhere. I also get the whole idea of like you have USDGC there in South Carolina, and then you hop over to where they typically have the Pro Tour Championship, and it's like the same market of people, and you don't want to have the case of making people decide 2 weekends in a row where they want to go spectate. So taking it to a different area completely brings in a whole nother market of consumers. I understand that. All right, I get it. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But yeah, the schedule looks kind of crazy. I mean, some noticeable things not there, some new things. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Is there a particular thing about the schedule that you think is weird or shouldn't be the case? Or is there an event that you're missing and wish was back on the tour? Or an event that you think needs to be off the tour? Put it in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on that. Now, moving along, the other topic I wanted to cover today were the new rules that we saw come into play for the PDGA for 2026. Now, I'm not going to read you the whole document. We're not going to go through every rule change because a lot of it is just basic nuance. But there are 4 things that I want to go over that I think are significant for the Pro Tour and what we're going to see when it comes to coverage and all that stuff. So the very first one we have to talk about is related to enforcement on determinations. And I'll read the rule to you. I'll put it up here on the screen so you can see it as well. But essentially, when the flight position or status of a disc is questionable, the determination is now made by a group vote. And the way it works now is that all players, excluding the thrower, must participate in the first vote. The option with the most votes is the determination of the group. So right off the bat, the thrower themselves, not part of the vote. Point number 2, the thrower may briefly state their opinion, but may not argue or lobby the group for an outcome. A thrower who argues or lobbies for an outcome has committed a courtesy violation. See 812 courtesy. That's interesting. Define lobbying? All right, if you're walking up to the line, I'm saying to you, hey, I think it's this. Is that me stating my opinion? Is that me lobbying? Well, what is the determination there? Point 3, if there is a tie after the first vote, the thrower then must vote in order to break the tie. And then point 4, players may abstain from a group vote if and only if they were not physically present. Otherwise, abstaining from a group vote is a courtesy violation. See 812 courtesy. So, kind of interesting how that works. If they're not present, I'm curious what that means. Maybe they DNF'd or something happened, but like they're saying that everyone should be watching everybody's shot. You got to vote on it. So the tiebreaker thing only happens when someone isn't present. It's an interesting rule. I think a lot of people are going to be very split on this one. This rule actually goes into effect not just for the pros, but also for AMs. And yeah, I think the no lobbying part is going to be the most complicated because people are still going to make their case. It's just who's going to call them on a courtesy violation for making their case. I think this is going to be, it's going to affect a few calls during the year, so it's not going to be a humongous deal all the time, but I think there are going to be 1 or 2 instances during the season where this could have a very interesting effect, especially if anyone chooses to call anyone for the lobbying of their position. The next rule I want to talk about is more specifically geared towards the Pro Tour and what they have going on, and it's the idea of what they're going to do when weather, daylight, whatever makes it difficult for them to finish competition on a given day. More specifically, what happens when it comes to Monday finish procedures. And this is a pretty large section, so I'm going to just summarize a few of the higher level points for you. First of all, it's only applicable for elite series or major events. And a couple of the high level rules are that if it's a world championship, it must be extended no matter how long until a champion is determined. There can be no tiebreakers or no whatever. You have to extend the tournament until a world champion is crowned. But this is kind of how it'll work here, which is yeah. For round extension procedures, when 16 or fewer players have not finished the last scheduled round, all players must be alerted of the time when play is going to stop, and at that time players must complete the hole they are playing and then cease further play, and play will continue the following day. It will begin with a shotgun restart at the time declared by the director. All players resume play on their next uncompleted hole and complete their round or playoff. So this is more for like daylight problem is happening. You've got maybe only 2 or 3 cards left on the course. They can tell everyone, hey, finish out your hole that you're on. We're going to be stopping after that and resuming the next day right where you're at. So this is just giving them a bit more of a ease for how it's going to work, especially if there are 16 or fewer players. When there are more than 16 players that have not finished the last scheduled round, the last scheduled round is considered complete, and the mid-event suspension and cancellation policy guidelines apply. The event adds an additional round as a final, which takes place in a staggered start format for the next day. It's Sunday, And due to weather delays, the play gets pushed and pushed and pushed, and now restart happens at like 4 o'clock, and they just determine there's no way people are going to be able to finish. It's just not going to happen. Well, like, 30 or 40 players are still going to be unfinished. They're going to essentially determine that round is completed, done, and they're going to take the top 12 players to advance to a final, to complete the event. And if there's a tie, so if a tie at a position prevents a cut to 12 players, the players tied for that position do not advance, and their event is considered complete, which is that's nuts. If the layout of the last scheduled round after stoppage ended up with 9 common holes or fewer, the layout for the finals will be the last 9 holes of that same layout. So, for example, if the final round of play stopped after everyone finished at least everyone finished hole 7 of an 18-hole layout, the finals the next day will be for holes 10 through 18. If the layout of the last scheduled round after stoppage ended up with more than 9 common holes, the layout for the finals will be the remaining holes for that same layout. So that's interesting. So, for example, if the final round stopped after all players completed holes 1 through 12 of an 18-hole layout, the finals will be on holes 13 through 18. So, long story short, the Pro Tour is trying to put in, and the PDGA is trying to put in rules for how they're going to restart play if it has to be extended past Sunday. There have been instances, it feels like this year and in the last year, where they've been fighting darkness, and this allows them to sort of handle those issues on the back end more effectively instead of scrambling for what the situation is going to look like. And I think reducing the field size to make it work makes the most sense. Taking just the top group and saying you're going to finish, I think that makes the most sense. Now, what can sometimes cause these issues? Pace of play. So the last 2 rules I want to cover, and I'll get you out of here, are the 2 pace of play related rules for the event. And so one of them is specifically on the amount of time that you take during your round, and then the next one is on how we're going to handle going over that time. So first, and very simply, is excessive time or time allotted in the fairway is changing. So historically, 30 seconds is what everyone has had to throw. And so now we're saying that players must ensure pace of play and must not take excessive time to make a throw. A player has taken excessive time if they have not thrown within the time allotted to them under this rule. And here's the new basic rule. When a player is making a throw from the teeing area, a drop zone, or within 20 meters of the target, the player has 30 seconds to throw. When making a throw from any other lie, the player has 45 seconds to throw. And the reason they're doing this is they're suggesting that in your practice of the round, you will have practiced, or you should have practiced, your tee shots and your drop zone shots. And the suggestion is that if you're on the putting green in circle 1 or circle 2, that should not take you a long time either. But anywhere else, you're going to end up in places during rounds that you never thought you would end up during your practice. So they're allowing more time for you to be able to get to those lies and make the play. And so now the next question begs is, when does that time officially start? Historically, there hasn't really been a determination there. It's left it very open-ended, and we've heard a lot of people talk about like what they think it is. Gannon talked about how at Ledgestone, the marshal on his card gave him examples of what counted as having the time beginning, and they're technically not in the rule book. So now they're going to be defining it. So here's how it works. The allotted time begins after 1. The previous player has thrown, and 2. The player is next in the throwing order, and 3. The player has determined the location of their lie, and 4. The player has addressed their lie, and 5. The playing area remains clear. Now, 4 of those make total sense. 4 is, what does address their lie mean? And the PDGA has said that a player has addressed their lie at the point when they begin taking any action indicating that they are preparing to throw, and such actions include, but are not limited to, marking a lie with a mini marker, placing a supporting point on the lie, executing a pre-shot routine, using a rangefinder, checking the wind, clearing casual obstacles, testing the ground and footing. Those are what they're saying means addressing a lie. Now, I'll be curious to see how people feel about, let's say your disc, you can kind of see it, it's a little off the fairway, right? And before you even walk towards it, you go, I'm going to go walk up the fairway and look at something real quick. Have you addressed your lie? Does that fall in the same rule? Like, where your lie is at. Maybe you're the next one to go. You're not range finding. You're kind of walking around the corner to just see. You can make the argument that you're walking around the corner to see if the playing area is clear. But, let's say you have a green flag. You're kind of walking to take a look. Are you addressing your lie? Can the marshal make a judgment that you're addressing your lie? I don't know. That's going to be a gray area they're going to have to figure out. But then it also builds in the rule here that if the playing area is no longer clear, players must not throw, and the allotted time is reset once the area is clear again. A great example of that is earlier this year, Gannon had a deer run through the green as he was trying to putt, and essentially he kind of stopped his routine. In this particular case, this would allow Gannon to restart his timer after the deer passes and the playing area is once again clear, allowing him to sort of not have to rush, I only have 5 seconds left, I gotta putt. It allows him to sort of retake his time and go through his routine again. And then a player who engages in undue delay arriving at their lie or is present at their lie but refuses to address their lie has taken excessive time. And that may address the whole walking up the fairway to look kind of thing. So we'll see. The problem that I have and that we're going to have to figure out is, how do we fairly say when the clock started? Is someone going to say your clock starts now or whatever? How are we going to determine what that is? It's the same problem we have now. How does a player tell another player, your 30 seconds has started, or I clocked you in at this time, without like some indication that something has, that it's begun? Like, we know in other sports where it's way more clear, like shot clocks in basketball, like when you have possession, that clock starts. Everyone knows that. But there's such a gray area here of like, did you do the things that required to have the clock start? I don't know. So is there going to be like a tone played, or someone's going to indicate like, hey, timer started? Or I don't know. That might be a little bit too nuanced, but you can see the point that I'm trying to make is that there's still gray area there, and it all comes down to whether or not players are going to call each other, which historically they haven't. And players like Gannon and Simon have come out and said, Gannon, number one player in the world, Simon, most popular player in the world, have come out and said, I'm not calling anyone on it. So like, what can we, but we have members of the Players Council, like Yuli had mentioned on Tour Life one week, that he thinks that they're definitely going to be calling people on it. So it's completely up in the air, and I don't know that it's going to change much, but that leads us into the last part of this, which is time extension. So the other thing they're trying to do is say, hey, sometimes shots are hard, so we're going to give you a chance to take more time for those shots. And so here, players in MPO and FPO divisions at majors and elite series events may use up to 2 time extensions per round. A time extension adds 30 seconds to the player's allotted time under 802.03.c. And the way it says here is that a player may use a time extension by notifying the group in a manner understandable to all players. Players may not use more than 1 time extension on a single throw. If a player were to exceed their allotted time under 802.03.c without using a time extension, another player in their group must, emphasize must, call the time extension on their behalf. This does not require a second and uses one of the throwing player's time extensions. If a player using time extensions and the playing area is no longer clear, their allotted time resets to the time specified in 802.03.c and play proceeds as if the player had not called the time extension. B. If a player exceeds an additional time allotted by a time extension, they receive warnings and penalties specified under 802.03.g. And if a player exceeds their allotted time under 802.03.c after using both time extensions, they receive a penalty throw. They do not receive a warning. Time extensions must be noted on the scorecard. This is a heavy rule here, because we know that they say here, the concept has been championed by the DGPT staff and the DGPT Players Council for several years. Members of the Players Council in particular believe this will help players make calls and will normalize self-officiating, and have committed to helping nurture that culture. People are saying they will not self-officiate. And the fact that the line here says that a player in the group must call out the time extension, that to me is one of the hardest parts of this, because not only now are we saying, hey, by the way, you're playing your tournament, yada yada, you're on the card with people, you have to be careful of the stuff if they go over time. Now you have to keep track of time to a point where you need to call a time extension. So we're taking players out of the focus of their rounds and saying, we need you to be on the stop clock, or the shot clock. We need you to be watching that like a hawk. I think personally that one of two things is going to happen. Either A, people aren't going to follow this at all, and they'll have a couple awkward scenarios during the year. People aren't going to follow it. Or B, you're going to see malicious compliance, and we're going to have everyone following it, and the general pace of play is going to deteriorate even more. I don't know how. Like, I understand that there are players who are being champions for this rule change. I don't know how they expect anyone to really follow this properly. I don't know how they're going to do it. They don't specify certain things. I'd be curious if, a caddy being an extension of a player, could my caddy's job be to have a stop clock and time every other player? That way I don't have to worry about it, and my caddy can just look at me and go, call him. How does that work? There's no lines in here about that. So I think there's just some gray area here, and I'd love to in the future get somebody from the PDGA on to talk about this specific thing. And I think I'm going to do that because I want to know how they're going to handle the gray area here. And I think I'm going to see what I can do to find out if players are going to even participate in this. It's very, very interesting. But hey, that does it for the PDGA rules for 2026. Let me know in the comments section, what do you think of time extensions? Would you be calling it if you were on the Pro Tour? And no, these are not for AMs, by the way, so don't worry, you won't be seeing these at your local C tiers. But would you call another player on this? Would you want to have a clock out timing players on every single shot to make sure they were keeping in time? I mean, it seems crazy, right? But let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be taking a look on Monday. We're going to look at a few things related to some events that have happened, get caught up on a couple interesting things about the tour, and then we will take a look on Wednesday at the upcoming event at D-Glow. And we're closing in on the end of the year and the playoffs and all kinds of fun stuff. So thank you again for your time. I appreciate it. If you like what you see, make sure to leave a like down below. Hit the subscribe button. It's one of the easiest ways you can help the growth of the channel. And I appreciate every single last one of you and your time. Make sure the rest of this weekend, you get out, you throw some plastic, you watch some disc golf. And until next time, this has been Understable Discourse.